So you want to move to Colorado, or maybe you already live in Colorado, but you want to watch this video to make sure you're really living in the best place. And yes, I have a janky ass spoon to help me in case I need to point to something in this general area that is invisible, but actually is here. So in this video, I am going to be giving you the top 5 best places to move to in Colorado. And if you don't know me, if you've just stumbled across this video, my name is Genevieve. I'm a Colorado native. I grew up in Boulder. I still live in Boulder right now, but I've made a lot of videos about Boulder, and one where I popped a lot of people's bubble about maybe not moving here. So in response to so many questions I got about, okay, well, if we don't move to Boulder, where do we move? I am making this video that has so much research and just knowledge from all my life here of where you really want to move to Colorado in 2021. The last thing I'll say before we jump right into it, if you enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. I do a lot of random human things on this channel, a lot of adventures, but then I also do a lot of tips on Colorado and living in Colorado. So if you'd like to be a human with me, I'd appreciate seeing you around on this channel. As we go through each of these places that I'm about to give you, I need you to keep yourself in mind as you watch this. Because the thing that was hard about making this list is that Colorado is really kind of different in different areas of the state. So when you think about moving here, you need to keep in mind, like, well, what are my values? Why am I moving to Colorado in the first place? What is it that I'm really hoping to get out of my experience in the state? Because that will really change the way you view this list, and it might change your preferences a little bit in that what you need might be a little bit different than what someone else needs. That being said, we are going to do this list a little bit differently, and we're going to start our way from the bottom of the list and make our way up to the number 1 place to move in Colorado. So with all my experience and research of Colorado, I have discovered that the 5th best place to live in Colorado is surprisingly Gunnison. And for those of you who are familiar with Colorado, maybe you're like, whoa, was not expecting Gunnison to be number 5 on the list. But it is. But here's the thing. It's a really amazing place to live in Colorado for a very specific type of person. Gunnison is off the beaten path. It's on the western slope. It's a little bit isolated from the rest of everything that tends to be on the Front Range of Colorado. But it's where you want to live if you are a wilderness and outdoor explorer buff. If you're moving into Colorado because really all you want to do is just be outdoors in the mountains, be able to ski, be able to hunt and fish and blah, all the things, Gunnison is a really great option for you. It's in absolutely beautiful, beautiful country, and it's much cheaper in a lot of ways than the rest of Colorado. The median home value in Gunnison is about $200,000, which is much cheaper than like a lot of other places in Colorado, and the average rent in Gunnison is about $800. Again, much cheaper than a lot of other places in Colorado. But here's the thing, Gunnison is not for you if you want any sort of nightlife, if you want to be around a lot of people. Living in Gunnison is living in a much more remote area. There is a university there, so there are young people there, but it's a much more quiet, I wouldn't even call it suburban. It's like, it's not as much suburban as it is just like almost like a very wildernessy yet large place to live. The people there are very friendly. There's a strong sense of community there that sometimes you can't find in other larger parts of Colorado. But if you're not into like a hardcore outdoorsy life, you would probably find it pretty boring to live in Gunnison. Now, moving on to number 4 on our list. Remember, we're making our way up. The 4th best place to live in Colorado in 2021 is definitely Fort Collins. Fort Collins is a pretty big city that's about an hour and a half directly north of Denver. It's home of Colorado State University, and it's just got a lot going for it right now. And Fort Collins is also a bit cheaper than a lot of other areas in Colorado, with the average home cost being about $340,000, and then the average rent being about $1,200 a month. Fort Collins is a great option for you if you still are moving to Colorado to be very outdoorsy, but you also want to be in an area that's a bit more populated. Like not super populated, it's like urban like Denver, but it's populated enough that there's a lot more going on to give you a little bit of spice of life besides just the outdoor stuff. I would also say that the people up in Fort Collins are typically a lot more laid back than what you might get, say, in Boulder or even like the Denver area, where people are a little more caring about image and, you know, wanting to seem cool. People in both Fort Collins and Gunnison tend to be that more salt of the earth people. They're just very laid back, they're very themselves, and that can just sometimes be an easier community to integrate into than a place that's like kind of hip or cool like Denver or Boulder. So all in all, Fort Collins is a great option for you if you want to be in a populated area that's near all of the typical Colorado outdoorsy stuff, and you don't value as much having a lot of urban or like more like cultural things around. Okay, number 3 on the list is Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs is actually the second most populated place in the entire state of Colorado. So it's kind of huge. And whereas Fort Collins is an hour and a half north of Denver, Colorado Springs is about an hour and a half south of Denver. It's a big city that's nestled right into the mountains. It has an amazing zoo, the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. It's like my favorite zoo in the whole world. And like I said, it's just a big area, so with a lot of people. So you're destined to probably find someone somewhere in there that you can find community with if you want to move to a big place. It's also so much cheaper than Fort Collins and Denver and Boulder, all those places. It's so much cheaper. The median home value in Colorado Springs is $250,000. And the average rent is only just over $1,000. Historically, Colorado Springs has always been seen as like almost like the opposite of Boulder, and that like where Boulder is like weirdly very progressive, Colorado Springs was always seen as like the opposite and being like weirdly very conservative. So that's one thing to take into mind. I think that image is changing a bit down there, just with having a lot more political views kind of coming into that area. But it's something to keep in mind that traditionally it has been a very conservative city, but also very friendly, very family oriented down there. It's just a very pleasant place to visit and to be and to live. So again, if you don't value as much being in like an urban place where there's like kind of like the epicenter of everything going on, if you don't value needing to be in the middle of it all so much, living in a place like Colorado Springs, if I can say it, is a really great option for you. Colorado Springs. All right, we're making our way up the list, guys. We're now at number 2 on the list. The second best place to live in Colorado is Longmont. And it's hard for me to say this with a straight face because as someone who is born and raised in Boulder, I currently live in Boulder, and I obviously have not put Boulder on this list. By the way, Boulder is not going to be number 1, spoiler alert. Growing up as a Boulderite, we have always had a bias and like a rivalry with Longmont that's just 20 minutes away from us. That, you know, that's where the Longmont Hicks live, and we're like the fancy Boulder people. It's very much like Parks and Rec, Pawnee versus Eagleton. Like Boulder is like Eagleton being all fancy, and then like Pawnee is like Longmont, who we think is like crappy. But the reality is that Longmont is not a bad place to live. It's in fact, I think, really an underrated and like amazing place to live. As I just said, it's very close to Boulder. It's only like a 20-minute drive on the diagonal between Boulder and Longmont. So I put it as number 2 because Longmont is a great option for you if you want to be close to Boulder, but you don't want to live in Boulder. It also has great proximity to Denver. So it's just overall a really great option in terms of location and price and even culture of being close to all the things that people typically want to be close to in Colorado, but also just being set back enough that you get a better price. You also just get maybe even a better community. Right now, the median home price in Longmont, Colorado is only $330,000. The average rent in Longmont is a little bit higher, and honestly, I think that is because of overflow from Boulder going to Longmont. The average rent in Longmont is about $1,200 a month. But honestly, you can find some great deals in Longmont on both rent prices and just homes. You kind of get everything you need in the package of living in Longmont. It's a great entry-level place if you are moving here for the first time, you really don't know where to go in Colorado, and you're also wanting to watch your budget. It's a great like starter place to move. But enough about Longmont, let's go to our #1 place on the list, and I wonder how many of you have guessed it, and that is the Denver metro area. And I very specifically say the Denver metro area because I actually don't think that living in Denver proper is the best place to live in Colorado. I think Denver proper is way overrated right now. But because the Denver metro area is so big, and there's honestly a lot of diversity in terms of even the different towns that are around Denver that I'm talking about, that like there's just, I could almost make my own different video just about where to live in the Denver area because there's just so many options. So to make it easy for both myself and for you in this video, I have pinpointed 3 specific areas around Denver that I want to highlight as where I actually think is the best place to live in Colorado and in the Denver area. The first place that I would say is the best place to live, and it actually is in Denver, it's a neighborhood within Denver, is Cherry Creek. If I had to continue living in Colorado forever and didn't live in Boulder, I would live in Cherry Creek in Denver. But here's the thing about Cherry Creek is that it is very expensive. The median home value in Cherry Creek is close to $600,000, and the average rent in Cherry Creek is about $1,500 per month. But unlike Boulder, that is very expensive, I think, for no reason, I think that being in the Cherry Creek area, you actually get a lot for your money. It's just an awesome part of Denver. You're close to everything, but you're also very kind of nestled away in like the beautifulness of Cherry Creek, in that you have so many amenities there. It's also just very beautiful and old, and it's just I think the perfect place in Denver to live. But if you can afford it, that is the caveat of Cherry Creek. The other 2 places that are in the Denver metro area that I would highly recommend that you look into moving are actually technically other cities that are like right outside of Denver, and that is Centennial and Littleton. The average median home price in Centennial is about $400,000, and then the rent average is like weirdly high, and I'm not really sure why, but it's almost $1,700 a month, so I don't know why rent is so high in Centennial, and then the average housing price is kind of lower. But anyway, it's still a really great place to live. It's just a super nice, again, like kind of a little bit of a suburban vibe, but still close enough to Denver, very close to the mountains. It's just the kind of place you want to raise a family in, but it's also a great place to live if you are a young single professional. It just has it all, and it's very comfortable. It's low crime. It's just a beautiful place. And then Littleton, the other place I recommend, the average median home price there is $380,000, and the average rent is about $1,300 a month. So a little bit cheaper than Centennial, but also just a really beautiful place. The only caveat to Littleton is that the crime is rated like a little bit higher there, and I'm not totally sure why. But it's very close to nature. They've got like a really big lake out there. You're also very close to Denver. It's only like a 20-minute drive just to get into Denver proper, like into downtown Denver from Littleton. And it's just a place I would highly recommend. But as you can see from this list alone, Colorado is kind of a diverse place in terms of how where you live in Colorado can really affect your cultural and like just physical experience of what it's like to live here. Which is why I say it's so important that if you're considering moving here, to really take into account why you specifically want to move here. Like, what is the experience that you would like to get out of it? What are your values, both political, but then also just in terms of community? And yeah, because move based on those things. So I hope this list gave you a really good scope in terms of kind of the different places you could live. And of course, there's like so many places that I left out. I feel like there are so many cool places in Colorado, and it's like this video could be 1,000,000 hours long, and I really wanted to narrow it down to the best places in Colorado for certain types of people. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed this weird spoon that I used off and on. So I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something about Colorado while you were watching it. If you liked the video, like it physically with the thumbs up thing. And of course, subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more of me, and I will see you in my next video.